Introduction to Server-Side. Welcome to MDN's Beginner's Server-Side Programming course. In the first article, we look at the server-side programming from a high level, answering questions such as, what is it? How does it differ from the client-side programming? And why is it so useful? After reading this article, you'll understand the additional power available to websites through server-side coding. So the prerequisites: basic computer literacy, basic understanding of what web server is, and the objective to gain familiarity with what the server-side programming is, what it can do, and how it differs from the client-side programming. So most large-scale websites use server-side code to dynamically display different data when needed, generally pulled out of the database, stored on a server, and sent to a client to be displayed via some code, HTML and JavaScript. Perhaps the most significant benefit of server-side code is that it allows you to tailor web content for individual users. Dynamic sites can highlight content that is more relevant based on user preferences and habits. It can also make sites easier to use by storing personal preferences and information. For example, reusing store credit cards details to streamline subsequent payments. It can even allow interaction with users of the site, sending notifications and updates via emails or through other channels. All these capabilities enable much deeper engagement with users. In the modern world of web development, learning about server-side development is highly recommended. So what is server-side programming? Web browsers communicate with web servers using the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, HTTP. When you click a link on a web page, submit a form, or run a search, an HTTP request is sent from your browser to the target server. The request includes a URL identifying the affected resource, a method that defines the required action, for example, to get, delete, or post the resource, and may include additional information encoded in the URL parameters, the field value pair sent via a query string, as post data, data sent by the HTTP post method, or in associated cookies. Web servers wait for client request messages, process them when they arrive, and reply to the web browser with an HTTP response message. The response contains a status line indicating whether or not the request succeeded. Example, HTTP 200 OK for success. The body of a successful response to a request would contain the request resource, e.g., a new HTML page or an image, which could then be displayed by the web browser. Okay. Static sites. The diagram below shows a basic web server architecture for a static site. A static site is one that returns the same hard-coded content from the server whenever a particular resource is requested. When a user wants to navigate to a page, the browser sends an HTTP GET request specifying its URL. The server retrieves the requested documents from its file system and returns an HTTP response containing the document and a success status, usually 200 OK. If the file cannot be retrieved for some reason, an error status is returned. Dynamic sites. A dynamic website is one where some of the response content is generated dynamically, only when needed. So on a dynamic website, HTML pages are normally created by inserting data from a database into placeholders in HTML templates. This is a much more efficient way of storing large amounts of content than using static websites. Dynamic site can return different data for a URL based on information provided by the user or stored preferences, and can perform other operations as part of a returning response. Example, sending notifications. Most of the code to support a dynamic website must run on the server. Creating the code is known as server-side programming, or sometimes back-end scripting. The diagram below shows a simple architecture for a dynamic website. As in the previous diagram, browsers send HTTP requests to the server, then the server processes the requests and returns the appropriate HTTP response. Requests for static resources are handled in the same way as for static sites. Static resources are any files that don't change, typically CSS, JavaScript, images, pre-created PDF files, etc. Requests for dynamic resources are instead forwarded to a server-side code, shown in the diagram as a web application. For dynamic requests, the server interprets the request, reads required information from the database, 3, combines the retrieved data from the HTML templates, and sends back a response containing the generated HTML. Are server-side and client-side programming the same? Let's now turn our attention to the code involved in the server-side and client-side programming. In each case, the code is significantly different. They have different purposes and concerns. They generally don't use the same programming languages, the exception being JavaScript, which can be used in the server and client side. That's what I'm using. They run inside different operating system environments. Code running in the browser is known as client-side code and is primarily concerned with improving the appearance and behavior of a rendered web page. This includes selecting and styling UI components, creating layouts, navigation, form validation, etc. By contrast, the server-side website programming mostly involves choosing which content is returned to the browser in response to the requests. The server-side code handles tasks like validating submitted data and requests, using databases to store and retrieve data, and sending the correct data to the client as required. Client-side code is written using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It is run inside the web browser and has little or no access to the underlying operating systems, including limited access to the file system. Web developers can't control what browser every user might be using to view a website. Browsers provide inconsistent levels of compatibility with client-side code features, and part of the challenge of client-side programming is handling differences in browsers support gracefully. Server-side code can be written in any number of programming languages. Examples of popular server-side web languages include PHP, Python, Ruby, C#, and JavaScript, Node.js. Server-side code has full access to the server operating system, and the developers can choose what programming language and specific version they wish to use. Developers typically write their code using web frameworks. Web frameworks are collections of functions, objects, rules, and other code constructs designed to solve common problems, speed up development, and simplify the different types of tasks faced in a particular domain. Again, while both client and server-side code use frameworks, the domains are very different, and hence so are the frameworks. Client-side frameworks simplify layout and presentation tasks, while server-side web frameworks provide a lot of common web server functionality you might otherwise have to implement yourself. Example, support for sessions, support for users and authentication, easy database access, templating libraries, etc. So here's a quick note. Client-side frameworks are often used to help develop the client-side code, but you can choose to write the client-side code by hand, and it's sometimes quicker. In contrast, you would never consider writing server-side components without framework, because it's really hard to do from scratch. So what can you do on the server side? Server-side programming is very useful because it allows the users to efficiently deliver information tailored for individual users and thereby create a much better user experience. Companies like Amazon use server-side programming to construct search results for products, make targeted product suggestions based on client preferences and previous buying habits, simplify purchases, etc. Banks use server-side programming to store account information and allow only authorized users to view and make transactions. Other services like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Wikipedia use server-side programming to highlight, share, and control access to interesting content. Some of the common uses and benefits of server-side programming are listed below. You'll note that there is some overlap. So number one, efficient storage and delivery of information. Imagine how many products are available on Amazon, and imagine how many posts have been written on Facebook. Creating a separate static page for each product or post would be completely impractical. Server-side programming allows us to instead store the information in a database and dynamically construct and return HTML and other types of files. It is also possible to return data, JSON and XML, for rendering by appropriate client-side web frameworks. This reduces the processing burden on the server and the amount of data that needs to be sent. The server is not limited to sending information from databases, and might alternatively return the result of software tools or data from communication services. The content can even be targeted for the types of client devices that it is receiving. Because the information is in a database, it can also more easily be shared and updated with other business systems. For example, when products are sold either online or in the shop might update its database of inventory. So here's another note. If you go to Amazon or any e-commerce sites, um, the structure of like the products don't change. It's just the product changes, but everything around it doesn't. So the HTML around is static while the server is changing the product. Number two, customized user experience. So servers can store and use information about clients to provide a convenient and tailored user experience. For example, many sites store credit cards or the details so you don't have to enter them again. Sites like Google Maps can even save your current location, providing route information, and search for travel history to highlight local businesses in your searched area. A deeper analysis of user habits can be used to anticipate their interest and further customize responses and notifications. For example, providing a list of previously visited or popular locations you may want to look up on a map. Number three, controlled access to content. Server-side programming allows sites to restrict access to authorized users and serve only the information that a user is permitted to see. Real-world examples include social networking sites, which allow users to determine who can see the content they post to the site and whose content appears in their feed. Four, store session and state information. So server-side programming allows developers to make use of sessions, basically a mechanism that allows a server to store information on the current user of the site and send different responses based on that information. So this allows, for example, a site to know that a user has previously logged in and displays links to their emails or order history, or perhaps save the state of a simple game so they can go back to the site again and continue where they left off. Five, notifications and communications. So servers can send general or user-specific notifications through the website itself or via email, SMS, instant messaging, video conversation, or other communication services. A few examples include Facebook and Twitter send emails and SMS messages to notify you of communications. Amazon regularly sends product emails that suggest products similar to the ones that you already bought or viewed and you might be interested in. A web server might send warning messages to site administrators, alerting them to low memory on the server or suspicious user activity. Data analysis. A website may collect a lot of data about users, what they search for, what they buy, what they recommend, how long they stay on each page. Server-side programming can be used to refine responses based on the analysis of this data. For example, Amazon and Google both advertise products based on previous searches and purchases. Data mining. It's big, it's big. Okay, so in summary, congratulations, you've reached the end of this first article about server-side programming. You've now learned that server-side code is run on a web server, and its main role is to control what information is sent to the user, while client-side code mainly handles the structure and the presentation of what the user sees. You should also understand that it is useful because it allows us to create websites that efficiently deliver information tailored for individual users and have a good idea of some of the things you might be able to do when you're a server-side programmer. Lastly, you would understand that server-side code can be written in a number of programming languages, and that you should use a web framework to make that whole process easier. In a future article, we'll help you choose the best web framework for your first site. Here, we'll take you through the main client-server interaction in just a little bit more detail. Ooh. I will be probably going through the server-side website programming on MDN web docs, just reading through it, trying to understand it, and I'll be posting that too. So thanks. Hopefully this helps someone. If not, it's helping me.